High above the frozen fields of Bremen, Germany, on the 20th of December 1943, a 19-year-old American pilot named Charles "Chuck" Yeager clings to the controls of his P-51 Mustang. The cockpit smells of oil and sweat. His breath fogs in the frigid air, 20,000 feet above the earth. Outside, the sky is a battlefield, a chaos of roaring engines and flashing gunfire. A German Messerschmitt Bf 109, piloted by Ludwig Franziska, a Luftwaffe veteran with 11 kills, locks onto Yeager's tail. Tracer rounds streak past, glowing like deadly fireflies, missing his canopy by inches. Yeager's hands tremble, not just from the cold, but from the weight of knowing he's seconds from death. He's on his 8th combat mission, a kid from the Appalachian Hills thrown into the crucible of World War II. His fuel gauge dips dangerously low. His ammo counter blinks at 60 rounds. The nearest friendly plane is 3 miles away, too far to help. Every lesson drilled into him at flight school screams, "Stay high, keep formation, wait for your wingman." The Army Air Force's tactics manual is clear: discipline saves lives, breaking away is suicide. But Chuck Yeager isn't thinking about manuals. He's thinking about survival. In a split-second decision, he does something no instructor would have dared teach. He rolls his Mustang upside down, yanks the stick back, and plunges toward the German countryside in a near-vertical dive. The airspeed needle surges 400 miles per hour, then 450, pushing the Mustang's wings to their breaking point. The horizon blurs as negative G-forces tug at his vision, graying the edges of his sight. This isn't a maneuver, it's a gamble with physics, a desperate bid to outrun death. Francisquet, confident in his Bf 109's superior dive, follows, his cannons blazing. He's hunted Allied pilots for 2 years, mastered every trick in the Luftwaffe's playbook. He expects Yeager to panic, to climb, to make the predictable move. But Yeager's dive isn't predictable. It's reckless, unthinkable, and unknown to either pilot at the time, about to rewrite the rules of air combat. This moment, born of instinct and defiance, will spark a revolution in how fighter pilots wage war. It will challenge decades of doctrine, save thousands of American lives, and shift the tide of the air war over Europe. To understand how a teenager from West Virginia changed history, we need to step back and see the bigger picture, a story of courage, innovation, and the stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. In the winter of 1943, the skies over Europe were a slaughterhouse for American airmen. The U.S. Army Air Force's 8th Air Force, tasked with crippling Nazi Germany's war machine through daylight bombing, was bleeding men and machines at a terrifying rate. Picture this: massive formations of B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators lumbering through the clouds, carrying crews who knew the odds were stacked against them. On the 17th of August 1943, during the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid, 60 bombers, 600 men were shot down or captured in a single day. That's 1 in every 5 planes gone. By October, another Schweinfurt mission cost 62 more bombers. For the young men flying these missions, a 25-mission tour felt like a death sentence. The problem boiled down to one word: range. American escort fighters like the P-47 Thunderbolt and P-38 Lightning could only go so far, barely to Germany's border, before their fuel tanks forced them to turn back. Once the escorts peeled away, Luftwaffe fighters pounced. German pilots, battle-hardened from years of war in Spain, Poland, and Russia, flew Messerschmitt Bf 109 seconds and Focke-Wulf 190 seconds with deadly precision. They didn't just outfight the Americans, they outsmarted them. Luftwaffe aces like Adolf Galland and Egon Meyer racked up kills at ratios of 3, 4, even 10 to 1. To the bomber crews, the sky beyond the escorts was a graveyard, a place they grimly called the killing zone. Inside the cramped, freezing turrets of a B-17, gunners like Sergeant John Miller, a 22-year-old from Ohio, watched for those glints of German fighters. In letters home, Miller wrote, "When the P-47 seconds turn back, it's like the lights go out. You pray, you shoot, but you know the wolves are coming." His words echoed the despair of thousands. The 8th Air Force was losing crews faster than it could train them, and the bombing campaign, the backbone of America's strategy to weaken Hitler, was on the verge of collapse. The solution seemed obvious: build a fighter that could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. Enter the P-51 Mustang, a sleek, long-range marvel from North American aviation. Designed by engineer Edgar Schmood and powered by a British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the Mustang wasn't just fast, it could fly 1,800 miles, far enough to shadow bombers deep into the Reich. By late 1943, Mustangs were rolling into England, ready to change the game. But there was a catch, one that no one saw coming. The tactics used to fight them were dead wrong. American fighter doctrine, written by senior officers who'd learned to fly in the open cockpit days of the 1,920 seconds, was rigid. Pilots were trained to stick to tight formations, execute choreographed maneuvers, and never ever break away on their own. The manual was treated like scripture, drilled into every cadet at flight schools across the U.S. Individual heroics were frowned upon, discipline was everything. But the Germans played a different game. Their finger-four formations and energy-fighting tactics using speed and altitude, like a boxer's jab and hook, ran circles around the Americans. After-action reports piled up with the same grim story. U.S. pilots, flying planes as good as or better than the Germans, were being outmaneuvered and gunned down. Behind the scenes, the men who built the Mustang were watching this unfold with frustration. Engineers like Schmood had poured years into perfecting the P-51's laminar flow wings and two-stage supercharger, giving it unmatched speed and range. "We gave them a race car," one North American technician later recalled, "but they were driving it like a tractor." The Mustang's potential was being squandered by outdated tactics, and no one in the upper ranks seemed to know how to fix it. More training, stricter adherence to the manual, better planes, these were the answers from headquarters. But none addressed the real issue. The rulebook itself was failing. As 1943 dragged on, the 8th Air Force stood at a crossroads. The P-51 offered hope, but without a new way to fight, it was just another tool in a losing battle. What no one expected was that the spark to ignite this change would come from an unlikely source, a young pilot with no college degree, no elite background, and a knack for seeing what others missed. Chuck Yeager, barely out of his teens, was about to step into this storm and turn it upside down. In the heart of the Appalachian foothills, where the Great Depression carved deep scars into small towns like Hamlin, West Virginia, a boy named Charles Yeager learned to survive. Born in 1923, Chuck grew up in a world of coal dust and hard scrabble. His father toiled in the mines and gas fields, while Chuck, barely a teenager, hunted squirrels and rabbits to keep food on the table. With a second-hand rifle, he developed a sharpshooter's eye, spotting game in the treetops at 300 yards. That keen vision, later measured at 20/10, twice as sharp as average, would one day save his life and change the course of a war. Chuck's life was no Hollywood story. He scraped through high school, more interested in fixing engines than cracking books. College was a pipe dream for a kid whose family counted pennies. But he had grit and a knack for machines, which landed him a spot in the U.S. Army Air Forces in September 1941, not as a pilot, but as an aircraft mechanic. Stationed in the Nevada desert, he wrenched on P-39 Airacobras, learning every bolt and wire of the planes he dreamed of flying. The cockpit felt like a distant world, reserved for college boys with polished accents and private flying lessons. Chuck, with his Appalachian drawl and grease-stained hands, didn't fit the mold. Yet, the war had a way of rewriting rules. By 1942, the Air Forces faced a dire pilot shortage. Losses in Europe and the Pacific were outpacing the training pipeline. Desperate, the service launched the Flying Sergeant program, giving enlisted men like Chuck a shot at the cockpit without the officer's commission or fancy degree. When he volunteered, his superiors raised eyebrows. "Yeager? He's a wrench-turner, not a flyer," one officer scoffed. His test scores were average, his education basic. But when he climbed into a trainer plane in California, something clicked. Instructors watched, stunned, as he handled the controls like he'd been born in the air. His reflexes were razor sharp, his spatial awareness uncanny. He didn't just fly, he danced with the machine. By March 1943, Chuck graduated flight school, earning his wings and a flight officer's commission. 8 months later, he stepped off a transport in England, assigned to the 363rd Fighter Squadron, 357th Fighter Group. His P-51B Mustang, serial number 43-6763, bore the name Glamorous Glen, a nod to Glen Nice Dick House, the sweetheart waiting back home. Her letters, tucked in his flight jacket, were a lifeline through the fear and chaos. "Come back to me, Chuck," she wrote. That promise fueled him, a quiet vow that no German ace would break. In the mess halls of RAF Leiston, Chuck stood out, and not always in a good way. His squadron mates, many from Ivy League schools or wealthy families, traded stories of yacht clubs and prep schools. Chuck's tales were of hunting trails and coal trains. Some pilots whispered he didn't belong, that a hillbilly couldn't hack it in the high-stakes world of fighter combat. But when they flew, Chuck's eyes spotted enemy specks on the horizon before anyone else. His hands coaxed the Mustang into turns others couldn't match. At 270 flight hours, he was green compared to the veterans, but his raw talent was undeniable. As he climbed into glamorous Glen for his 8th mission on the 20th of December 1943, Chuck carried more than fuel and ammo. He carried the weight of a war that demanded everything: courage, instinct, and maybe a touch of recklessness. The sky over Bremen was about to test him in ways no one, not even Chuck himself, could have predicted. The sky over Bremen on the 20th of December 1943 is a frozen arena, a blur of steel and smoke, where life and death hinge on split-second choices. Chuck Yeager, strapped into glamorous Glen, his P-51 Mustang, feels the weight of the moment. At 19, he's a speck in the vastness of war, locked in a deadly chase. Behind him, Ludwig Francisquet, a Luftwaffe ace with 11 kills, pilots a Messerschmitt Bf-109, its nose trained on Yeager's tail. Francisquet's cannons spit fire, tracer rounds slicing the air like glowing knives. One wrong move, and Chuck's war ends in a fireball. His fuel is low, his ammo down to 60 rounds. The nearest American plane is a distant dot, 3 miles away. Every fiber of his training screams at him to climb, to stay high where the Mustang's speed shines, to wait for help that won't come. The Army Air Force's manual is relentless. Maintain formation, execute standard evasions, never go it alone. But Chuck isn't thinking about doctrine. He's thinking about Glen Nice's letters, about the hills of West Virginia, about living to see another dawn. In that heartbeat of desperation, he makes a choice that defies every rule in the book. He slams the stick forward, rolls glamorous Glen upside down, and dives straight down, a plummeting arrow toward the German field 7,000 feet below. The airspeed needle spins wildly, 400 miles per hour, then 450, then 480. The Mustang's wings shudder, stressed to their limits, as the roar of the Merlin engine becomes a scream. Negative G-forces press Chuck into his harness, his vision tunneling as blood rushes from his head. This isn't flying, it's falling with purpose, a reckless bet against physics and fate. Francisquet, peering through his gun sight, is stunned. He's hunted dozens of Allied pilots, seen them climb or turn, predictable as clockwork. No one dives like this. The Bf-109's fuel-injected engine gives it an edge in steep dives, or so the manuals claim. Confident, he follows, diving after the Mustang, his fingers tight on the trigger. But something's wrong. The P-51 isn't slowing. Its sleek frame, powered by a 2-stage supercharger, cuts through the dense lower air like a blade. At 500 miles per hour, the Mustang pulls ahead, a fleeting shadow Francisquet can't catch. Chuck's controls feel like they're carved from stone, locked by the crushing aerodynamic pressure. At 1,500 feet, with the ground rushing up, he hauls back on the stick with both hands. The G-forces slam him into his seat, his vision nearly blacking out. Glamorous Glen groans but holds, leveling out at 800 feet, still screaming at 480 miles per hour. Francisquet tries to match the pullout, but his Bf-109, bled dry of speed, lags behind at 320 miles per hour. Chuck glances back and sees the impossible. The German ace, once his hunter, is now prey, wallowing slow and low. Seizing the moment, Chuck banks hard, swings behind the Bf-109, and lines up at 400 yards. He squeezes the trigger. A 3-second burst of 50 caliber rounds rips into Francisquet's wing and fuselage. The Messerschmitt trails smoke, rolls left, and spirals toward the earth. Chuck doesn't linger to watch it crash. He climbs, heart pounding, hardly believing he's alive. In those frantic seconds, Chuck Yeager didn't just survive. He stumbled onto a truth that would reshape air combat. At extreme speeds, the P-51 Mustang could outrun and outmaneuver its German rivals, turning a desperate escape into a deadly counterattack. He didn't know it yet, but his dive, later called the high-speed yo-yo, was the spark of a revolution, one that would challenge the Air Force's rigid playbook and save countless lives. The question now was whether anyone would believe him. Back at RAF Leiston, the damp English air hums with the drone of returning Mustang. Chuck Yeager lands glamorous Glen, his heart still racing from the dive that saved his life and downed a German ace. As he climbs from the cockpit, his face flushed with adrenaline, he reports the impossible to his squadron commander. He outran a Messerschmitt Bf 109 inches, a screaming dive, turned the tables, and shot it down. The room goes quiet. Major Thomas Hayes, a seasoned officer with a stack of manuals on his desk, leans forward, eyes narrowing. "That's not possible, Yeager," he says. "The 109's fuel-injected engine outdives us every time. You must have misidentified the plane." Chuck stands firm, his Appalachian drawl steady as he recounts the airspeed 500 miles per hour, the controls locking up, the German lagging behind. But the intelligence officer scribbles "inconclusive" on his report. The gun camera footage, blurred by the violent dive, offers no clear proof. To the senior pilots, Chuck's story sounds like the confused ramblings of a green 9-year-old rattled by combat. You can't outdive a Messerschmitt, Hayes insists. It's physics. The Air Force's tactics manual, written by men who flew canvas-winged biplanes in the 1,920 seconds, is treated as gospel. Diving to escape is a rookie mistake, a one-way ticket to a shallow grave. Behind closed doors, the dismissal stings. Chuck isn't a scholar or a strategist. He's a kid from West Virginia who trusted his instincts. But he's not alone. Across England, other pilots start whispering similar stories. Lieutenant William Wisner, escaping two Focke-Wulf 190 seconds, swears his Mustang pulled away in a high-speed dive. These reports, scattered and unpolished, reach Captain Don Blakesley, a hard-charging commander of the 4th Fighter Group. Blakesley, with a reputation for pushing planes and pilots to their limits, smells something the brass doesn't: a crack in the doctrine. On the 11th of January 1944, Blakesley takes a P-51B over the English Channel for a series of gut-wrenching dive tests. At 25,000 feet, he pushes the Mustang past 450 miles per hour, then 500, watching the airspeed climb in ways no manual predicted. The results are undeniable. Below 20,000 feet, at extreme speeds, the P-51's two-stage supercharger and low-drag wings give it an edge over German fighters. Blakesley pens a report, his words sharp and urgent, and sends it to 8th Air Force Fighter Command. He's not just challenging a tactic, he's challenging a mindset. The response is a firestorm. At the 18th of January 1944, meeting in London, Blakesley faces a room of colonels and majors, their careers built on the old rules. Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, slams his fist on the table. "This is cowboy nonsense," he barks. "Formation flying saves lives. You're telling us to throw out decades of training for some kid's stunt." Another officer points to the science. German fuel injection trumps American carburetors in dives. The room buzzes with indignation. To admit Blakesley's right means admitting the manual is wrong and that a teenager from nowhere saw it first. Then Major General William Kepner, head of 8th Fighter Command, cuts through the noise. Kepner's a maverick, a World War I pilot who's buried too many friends to cling to outdated ideas. "I don't care about your manuals," he says, his voice low but firm. "I care about dead pilots." Blakesley's group is outflying the Luftwaffe. If a dive works, I want to know why. Kepner's own war, fought in open cockpits, taught him that survival trumps tradition. He orders immediate tests. Over 2 weeks, test pilots push P-51 seconds to their limits, confirming Blakesley's findings. At high speeds, the Mustang leaves German fighters in the dust. On the 3rd of February 1944, Kepner issues a directive that shakes the Air Forces to its core. Pilots are now free to use individual initiative and high-speed dives, breaking the shackles of rigid formations. The old guard reels, but Kepner's word is law. What began as Chuck Joger's desperate gamble is now a spark igniting a new way to fight, one that will turn the tide over Europe's skies. By February 1944, the skies over Germany were no longer the Luftwaffe's playground. The 8th Air Force, armed with P-51 Mustangs and a bold new playbook, was rewriting the rules of combat. Major General William Kepner's directive greenlighting high-speed dives and individual initiative unleashed American pilots like hawks set free from their cages. The tactics born from Chuck Joger's desperate dive, now called energy fighting, turned the hunter into the hunted, and the results were nothing short of staggering. Take the 3rd of March 1944 over Berlin. Chuck Joger, now a seasoned pilot with 12 kills, leads a flight of 4 Mustangs at 28,000 feet, guarding 300 B-17 bombers lumbering toward the German capital. Below, Luftwaffe ace Oberleutnant Heinz Baer, with 170 kills, climbs to intercept with a swarm of Bf-109 seconds. Baer spots the Mustangs and angles for a diving attack, expecting the Americans to hold formation like sitting ducks. But Joger's eyes, sharp as ever, catch the glint of German wings first. Instead of sticking to the old script, he rolls Glamorous Glen into a blistering dive not away, but toward the enemy, hitting 600 miles per hour. His wingman, Lieutenant Clarence Bud Anderson, follows without a second thought. The Mustangs streak beneath Baer's formation, pulling up in a gut-wrenching climb. Baer, focused on the bombers, never sees them coming. Joger fires a 2-second burst, shredding a Bf-109's wing. Anderson nails another, sending it spiraling in flames. The fight lasts 45 seconds. 2 German fighters down, 0 American losses. The bombers press on, untouched. Across the sky, similar scenes unfold, Mustang pilots diving from impossible angles, striking fast, and zooming back to altitude. The Luftwaffe, used to predictable American formations, is caught flat-footed. The numbers tell the story. In January 1944, before the new tactics, the 8th Air Force's kill ratio against the Luftwaffe was a grim 2.1 to 1. By April, it soared to 4.3 to 1. By June, it hit 6.1 to 1. Bomber losses, once a catastrophic 20% per mission, plummeted to under 4%. For B-17 crews like Lieutenant Robert Morgan, the change was a lifeline. "The Mustang boys stopped being our escorts," Morgan wrote home. "They became our hunters." The Germans started running from them. In the freezing gun turrets of bombers, men who'd once braced for death now dared to hope they'd see home. The Luftwaffe felt the shift, like a punch to the gut. German ace Johannes Steinhoff, scribbling in his diary, noted, "The Americans fight like we did in 1940, fast, fearless, from every angle. Their Mustangs are devils at speed." The Germans' elite pilots were dying faster than they could be replaced. Training programs, once rigorous, were slashed to months, churning out rookies who barely survived their first sortie. Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's fighter chief, warned his superiors in April 1944, "We're losing our edge. The Mustang pilots have stolen our tactics and made them better." Beyond the battlefield, the new tactics reshaped the American Air Force's spirit. Pilots, once bound by rigid formations, embraced a swagger that echoed the Wild West. They weren't just defenders anymore, they were predators, chasing glory in the clouds. This shift rippled into popular culture, inspiring war bond posters and radio shows that painted Mustang pilots as America's new cowboys. The P-51, optimized for speed and agility, became a symbol of U.S. ingenuity, a machine that thrived when flown with daring. By mid-1944, the 8th Air Force was clawing its way to air superiority. Thousands of bomber crewmen, who would have perished under the old rules, flew home to their families. The Luftwaffe's grip on the skies was slipping, and Chuck Yeager's split-second gamble was at the heart of it all, a spark that lit a fire across Europe's battlegrounds. As the smoke cleared over Europe in 1945, the P-51 Mustang stood as a titan of the skies. With 15,586 built, it destroyed 4,950 enemy aircraft in air combat, more than any other Allied fighter. The 357th Fighter Group, Chuck Yeager's unit, claimed the highest kill ratio in Europe, downing 609 German planes while losing just 106. These weren't just numbers, they were lives saved, missions completed, and a war brought closer to victory. At the heart of this triumph was a tactic born from a 19-year-old's desperate dive, energy fighting, the art of trading altitude for speed to outmaneuver foes. What started as a survival instinct reshaped aviation for decades. Chuck Yeager's war didn't end in 1945. He flew 64 missions, notched 11.5 kills, and survived being shot down, evading capture in occupied France with help from the resistance. But his greatest test came on the 14th of October 1947, when he climbed into the Bell X-1, a rocket-powered bullet of a plane. Over the California desert, Yeager broke the sound barrier, becoming the first human to fly faster than Mach 1. The skills he honed in Glamorous Glen managing speed, mastering high-G maneuvers proved critical in that historic moment. His dive over Bremen wasn't just a wartime fluke, it was a glimpse of aviation's future. The energy-fighting tactics Yeager stumbled upon became the bedrock of modern air combat. From the F-86 Sabre in the Korean War to today's F-22 Raptor, every U.S. fighter pilot learns to trade altitude for airspeed, striking fast and vanishing before the enemy can react. At the Air Force Academy and Navy's Top Gun School, instructors still teach the high-speed yo-yo, crediting its roots to the Mustang pilots of 1944. The P-51's design, optimized for speed and agility, influenced jet-era fighters, proving that a great machine paired with bold tactics could dominate any battlefield. The ripple effects went beyond the cockpit. Bomber crews, like Captain Robert Morgan of the B-17 Memphis Belle, owed their survival to the Mustang's new playbook. Morgan, who flew 30 missions, tracked Yeager down at a 1,950 seconds airshow. "My crew should have been dead by mission 8, he told him, voice thick with gratitude. "Because of you, I got to hold my kids." Thousands of airmen returned home, their families untouched by the grief that 1943's loss rates promised. The 8th Air Force's air superiority paved the way for D-Day and the fall of the Third Reich, a victory built on the courage of pilots who dared to break the rules. Yeager's story holds a deeper lesson, one that echoes beyond aviation. Innovation often comes from the margins, from a West Virginia kid with no pedigree, dismissed by the brass until the evidence was undeniable. History is littered with breakthroughs ignored because they came from the wrong person. Take John Tharsh, whose Tharsh weave tactics saved Navy pilots in the Pacific, or even penicillin, nearly buried by skeptical scientists. Yeager's dive reminds us that truth doesn't care about rank or credentials, it just needs someone bold enough to see it. Today, as drones and AI reshape warfare, the same challenge looms. Will we listen to the next unlikely voice? The Air Force's shift in 1944 wasn't just about tactics. It was about humility, about leaders like William Kepner, who bet on results over tradition. Chuck Yeager, who retired as a brigadier general in 1975, never claimed to be a genius. "I was just trying to stay alive," he wrote in his memoir. But that raw instinct, paired with a machine that could dance with his daring, changed the world. When Yeager passed away in 2020 at 97, his obituary hailed him as a test pilot legend, the man who broke the sound barrier. But it missed the quiet revolution he sparked over Bremen, a moment when a kid with nothing but guts and a Mustang rewrote the art of war. His legacy lives in every jet streaking across the sky, in every pilot trained to fight with speed and nerve, and in the timeless truth that sometimes the greatest ideas come from those who don't know they're supposed to fail. Chuck Yeager's story isn't just a chapter in a history book, it's a testament to the American spirit. A kid from the backwoods of West Virginia, armed with nothing but grit, a sharp eye, and a P-51 Mustang, didn't just survive a war, he changed how it was fought. His desperate dive over Bremen in 1943 sparked a revolution that saved thousands of lives, broke the Luftwaffe's grip, and laid the foundation for the jets screaming across today's skies. Yeager didn't set out to be a hero. He was just a young man trying to make it home to Glennice, to the hills he loved. Yet, in that moment of defiance, he showed us what's possible when courage meets opportunity. This is why we tell stories like his. They remind us that greatness can come from anywhere, a small town, a mechanic's toolbox, a cockpit under fire. They challenge us to look past titles and credentials, to listen when someone says the impossible might just work. In a world racing toward new frontiers, drones, AI, space, Yeager's legacy urges us to stay open, to bet on the underdog, to trust the spark of a bold idea. That's the heart of America, a place where a nobody can become a legend by daring to try. We dive deep into these forgotten stories to bring you the truth behind the triumphs, the human struggles behind the history. But we can't do it without you. If Chuck's story moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join us for more tales of courage and ingenuity. Share this video with someone who loves history, aviation, or just a damn good story. Drop a comment, tell us what Yeager's gamble means to you, or who else in history deserves a spotlight. Your support keeps these stories alive, fueling the research and passion that go into every frame. As you leave this video, carry Yeager's lesson with you. The next time someone says that's not how it's done, think of a 19-year-old pilot diving toward the Earth at 500 miles an hour, proving the experts wrong. The future belongs to those who dare to break the rules and to those who listen when they do. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the skies.